My name is Shaylin Jackson, and I will be providing features of the webcast web event technology, managing the chat, and presenting the session facilitators. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acquaint you with a few features of this web event technology. At any time, you may adjust your audio using any computer volume settings that you may have. On the right hand of your screen, you will see the Q&A chat window. There's a large window which holds all of your sent messages and a smaller text box at the top where you will type in your questions. To send a question, click in the text box and type your text. When finished, click the Ask button. Your questions will be responded to at the end of the presentation as time permits. We are joined today by our session facilitators, Jeffrey Korzenik, Managing Director and Chief Investment Strategist at Fifth Third Bank, and Jerry Blassingame, CEO of Sorteria Communication Development Center. I invite you to review their bios, which can be accessed via the DEI Summit virtual event platform. And at this time, I would like to turn the microphone over to session presenter Jeffrey, who will start us off first. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I have the great privilege of traveling the country on behalf of Fifth Third Bank and sharing the business case for hiring people with criminal records. And we have a very strong belief that criminal justice reform is good for business. And I'll also share the corresponding belief that the engagement of the business community is also good for the criminal justice reform effort and community. I'd like to start out by sharing our thoughts through some slides that I hope you'll find of value. And if we're going to make the case that criminal justice reform and hiring people with criminal records is good for business, you really have to start out by setting the framework of what's good for business, what's good for growth of the U.S. economy. And economists believe, and forgive me, I understand not everyone is a graph person, but we'll do our best with this. Economists all understand, there's no dispute about this, that the potential for an economy to grow is a function of really just two inputs. How fast can you grow your workforce, and how productive can they be? The data you see before you is from the Congressional Budget Office. It's nonpartisan, and all but the far right-hand bar are historic numbers. And if you look at, say, that far left-hand bar, the average GDP growth rates from 1950 to 1973 were just a stunning 4%. Great news for the U.S. economy and great news for business. Where did we get it from? Well, roughly 1.5% of that growth, the green section, came from labor contribution, growing our workforce. And then the gray part, the rest of that growth, came from growing the productivity of those workers. And you can see that gray portion, labor productivity, kind of comes and goes. But the green portion, our labor force growth, which is such a critical element of our opportunity to grow, has been shrinking. And by the time you get to the last two bars, you'll see it's been largely dooming our economy to very slow growth, roughly 2% growth, far cry from where we were in the 1950s and 60s. So this is a real challenge for the business community, and there are only so many levers you can pull. I want to hone in on what I think is really the most important lever, and that is our labor force growth. This has been something that has been holding back growth in the U.S. economy for over a period of decades, and it's very simple. It's driven by declining birth rates in the U.S. So it would look on the surface that we're kind of doomed to slower and slower growth based on our birth rates. And it is true that immigration could help foster faster workforce growth to some degree, but this is really a global phenomenon. Declining birth rates across the world are creating a labor shortage, and a labor shortage creates a slower growth environment. What I'd like to point out to you is if you think back to, say, 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, the top of the list of challenges for every business survey of business owners was we can't find talent. And frankly, that's after a period where we were kind of lucky. We had the good fortune to have the millennial birth boom. If you look right in the center of this chart, 1990, you'll see birth rates, we had a spike in birth rates leading up to 1990, and then it's been dropping since. So if you think about all those millennials born in 1990, they're 30-year-olds today. They're largely in the workforce, either actively employed or actively looking for employment. But if we're now looking to hire from, say, people born in 1995, that birth rate was 20% below the millennial peak. And by the end of last year, 2019, the birth rate was 40% below the millennial peak. So we have a real challenge of an economy long-term running out of labor. Obviously, we have high unemployment today, but it simply won't last. These demographics are determining our destiny. But there's another side to the labor market, and that is a concept economists call labor force participation rate. What percentage of adults, technically civilian, non-institutionalized adults, what percentage of adults are actually in the labor force, meaning actively employed or actively seeking employment? And what you'll see is that this peaked in the United States in 2000, and it's been declining, largely declining since, stabilized a few years ago, and had started to come back before the pandemic. So it's not just birth rates, it's what good use are we making? What opportunities for employment are we offering to our population? And some of the decline from the peak in 2000 down over the next 15 or 20 years was explained simply by demographics. Baby boomers were aging out of the labor market. But at Fifth Third, we came to the conclusion that there were three societal ills that were playing a really big role in holding back our labor force growth through holding back our labor force participation rate. Long-term unemployment in the wake of 08, 09, and we're worried about that repeating itself today. People who are long-term unemployed tend to drop out of the workforce or tend to be unable to come back in at fully productive, in as fully productive roles as they had when they left. The opioid epidemic, drugs in general, but the opioid epidemic in particular has been a scourge on families and communities and has also impacted the workforce. And closely related to this, of course, is the incarceration and recidivism cycle in the US economy. And I know Jerry will talk about some local numbers as well, but suffice it to say that the US, and you all know this, has an extraordinarily high rate of incarceration. And we couple that with really bad rates of recidivism. We don't, in many cases, give people the opportunity, once they've been through the criminal justice system, to come back and lead fully contributing and meaningful lives by becoming fully employed and gainfully employed. This is not just a societal tragedy, this is an economic loss. I don't focus too much about this on my presentations, but it is important to understand that these burdens of incarceration and recidivism have not been distributed equally across society. The top two maps in the United States, the top row, is the 1980 situation. Upper left is overall rates of incarceration in the population. The darker the shaded area, the more incarceration has been going on per capita. You can see on the left, upper left, is the overall population in 1980. In the right is the African American incarceration experience. It is greater rates of incarceration, but perhaps not incredibly higher. But look what had happened after the decades following the 1980s and particularly 1990s. By 2010, you had, it is true, higher rates of incarceration across the country. But look how devastating was the burden felt by the African American community in the lower right. It's not my role to talk about racial justice in the United States, but from the standpoint of economics, it's important to understand what having this burden fall so distinctly on specific communities has meant. It's meant in many cases that the traditions of work, how do you interact with a supervisor? What do you do if something goes wrong? How do you handle a dispute at work? All of these things that many of us learned from our parents have often been lost because of the burdens of incarceration and the lack and the hurdles to employment in these communities. This means it's harder for people with criminal records in many cases to become successful employees. But there's an opportunity here, and the numbers are so large that we have to view this. Yes, it is a tragedy that we've gotten to this point, but it's an incredible economic opportunity for us to fix what has gone wrong. The number I like to focus on is the number of people with felony convictions in the United States. 19 million Americans have felony convictions. 1 or 2 million of them are currently incarcerated, and some are have aged out of the labor force. But it probably means 10 or 12 million people with felony convictions are outside of incarceration and of employable age. Yet we know that unemployment is rampant in this community because of the burdens of incarceration. We know that many have dropped out of the workforce. We know of those who are still in the workforce, many are unemployed and looking for employment. And we know that even those who are employed, the burden of a felony conviction is such that your opportunities for advancement are limited. You often can't move from one firm to another. You often have limited career tracks. So I venture to say nearly everyone in the United States who has a felony conviction is at minimum underemployed. This is a waste of resources, a waste of, obviously there's an ethical angle to this as well, but from a standpoint of an economic and business case, this is an opportunity to lift people up to their fuller potential. But given the burdens that have fallen on people, given the lack of work opportunity, it's a challenge. And what our research has shown is it's not just a matter of hiring someone with a criminal record, giving a second chance, it's doing it right. And we've studied businesses across the country that have focused on this, and they all share common models of success. And those models have really two features with them. One is you need a system for identifying who's ready for employment, who's ready to turn their life around. And this often means you need the services of a nonprofit or sometimes government agencies to help support people, give them the skills. Often it's critically the soft skills as well as hard skills to be employed, to give them mentorship, and to figure out who's truly ready to turn their life around. But even hiring someone like that is not sufficient because very often they come with excessive burdens, what are called collateral consequences, consequences that are outside their sentence but are de facto sentences and often life sentences, even for relatively minor crimes. They may have difficulty having access to housing, transportation, and all of these things need to be supported in order to have a successful employee. Often this requires a partnership of the private sector, an informed business owner. Government help is often important, but critically the role of nonprofits, preparing people for work, helping keep them sustaining their employment. It sounds like a lot of work, and to do it right, it is some work. The second chance employers that I work with all talk about this as an investment. And as one employer in Ohio told me, second chance hires, people with criminal records, are more work up front, but they're worth it. Here's what we know. When you find the person who's ready to turn their life around and rebuild their life through employment, and then you give them the tools to sustain that employment and allow them to thrive, you get not just an ordinary employee, you get an employee who is exceptionally engaged. They care, they appreciate the opportunity, and exceptionally loyal. High engagement and low turnover in the business community is the secret sauce that goes into higher productivity. You don't have high turnover costs with these employees. You don't have to work that goes undone because you've had a staffing shortage because someone left. You don't have recruiting costs. You don't have onboarding costs. So it is absolutely a business proposition, and one that we hope and expect the business community to embrace in the decade ahead. With that, let me turn it over to my co-presenter, Jerry Blassingame, who can talk about the wonderful work. I will say the business community in Greenville is blessed to have a wonderful nonprofit that can sustain this kind of and support this kind of second chance employment. So let me turn it over to you, Jerry. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for the business case. I really appreciate that. And I wish people were like you were around 20 years ago when I started Soteria. So again, I'm Jerry Blassingame. I am the founder and CEO of Soteria Community Development Corporation. We're located in Greenville, South Carolina. And I started Soteria in 1999 when I was released from a 20-year prison sentence. And so people would always ask me, Jerry, why are you doing this work? And I have to share my story, just a little bit of my story, so that, people can understand exactly, why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I help the people that I help. When I was 5 years old, I witnessed my mother murdered, and I had 4 other siblings. My grandmother took us and raised us. I did really good in school and ended up, going to high school, doing great. Got to college, got a 2-year scholarship to architecture engineering. And while I was in college back in the 80s, I began to sell drugs to make extra money. And I was arrested. The second time I was arrested, I received a 20-year sentence. But the whole time I was in prison, I saw people who looked just like me, some educated, some, from well-off homes, some from poverty-stricken neighborhoods like mine. And I realized one day I was going to be out of prison, and I began to write and form a vision for Soteria. And in 3.5 years, I was released on parole. I had 11 years parole in 1999 when I was released. But I had a vision written for Soteria. And I just want to share a little bit of the story and my vision, from the nonprofit perspective. Just to talk about kind of how we've been able to formulate a plan for men and women who have been incarcerated and want to get out and live their lives to the fullest. So our mission is we advocate for economic and social justice for those and their families who are impacted by the criminal justice system. We work to create opportunities for previously incarcerated individuals, men and women, to re-enter society through housing, life skills, job training. Our vision: we will be a model for successful faith-based initiative by aligning government, churches, nonprofit organizations, and industry and community leaders in order to empower long-term positive change. And that kind of, goes with the model that Jeff talked about. This is something that I was doing over 20 years ago, and people thought I was crazy. And Jeff just showed us the model that the only way that we can have a secure second chance opportunity for people is for all of us in the community to come together. And so, what is mass incarceration? Mass incarceration is the term used by historians and sociologists to describe the substantial increase of people who are incarcerated in the United States prison over the last 40 years. Over the last 40 years, the rate of incarceration in America has increased over 500%. And in my state in South Carolina, it's about 700%. I think in the early 1970s, we had about 2,500 people in our prison system. Now we have over 20,000 in our prison system in South Carolina. So here's the problem. Mass incarceration is a human rights issue impacting about 2.3 million people in our nation. So right now, as I speak, there are 2.3 million people locked up in our jails and prisons. Over 70 million people have convictions. White males is one in 6. Hispanic males, 1 in 36, and Black males, 1 in 16. But the lifetime likelihood of imprisonment of a male born after 2001, 1 in 17 white males, 1 in 16 Hispanic males, and 1 in 3 Black males. Now, to me, that's criminal that 1 in 3 Black males born after 2001 has a chance of going to prison. In my state in South Carolina, it costs about $25,000, almost $26,000 to incarcerate a person for 1 year. The average stay is 4 years, and we're looking at over $100,000 that we spend on incarcerating a person. The count this time last year was about 19,000 people. So our state prisons spend about $500 million a year incarcerating people. And the sad thing about that is that when a person gets released from prison, they release them back to the county where they were sentenced with nothing but a bus ticket to the nearest bus station. No job, no housing. they release people like us and they say, go do good, do well, go and take care of your family, go and pay your probation or parole without any resources, no birth certificate, no social security card, no driver's license, no type of identification. And so that's where organizations like Soteria come in place, because we will grab people the day they get out of prison. We work with them about 3 to 6 months before they get out so that we have some background on them. And we help these guys get their IDs. We help them get work clothes and shoes and boots and things like that, so that when they go to their first day, that they have the proper clothing and things like that. We also help them get their hygiene and other things that they need. But here's the problem: barriers to reentry. Jeff talked about the collateral consequences. I don't know if a lot of people know, but there are 48,000 laws and statutes called collateral consequences that continue to punish people after they're released. Realities of reentry, things like fines, lack of transportation, homelessness, no positive support network, minimal job opportunities. And my personal story of a collateral consequence is that when I was released from prison, I wanted to go back and finish my degree as an architect. And they told me that I could not get licensed as an architect because of my felony drug conviction. And that is absurd that I could not get a Pell Grant because of a drug conviction, not a murder, not a rape, not a robbery, but a drug conviction. And so I was able to go to school. I got a loan, and I was working with a civil engineering firm, and my boss, said, well, Jerry, let's see if we can get you licensed as an architect. But because of my drug conviction, I could not get licensed in my state as an architect. So I decided to just go full time in nonprofits. But the result is over 60% of the people remain unemployed a year after release. And I wonder, how do our country, our states expect people to do well if 60% remain unemployed after a year of release? And so that's why second chance employment is so important. But there is a solution. It's not all downhill. And that's why I created a community development corporation. If you look at the black line in the middle, that's a barrier. And most of the time when people get incarcerated, they get out, they hit the walls, the barriers, the collateral consequences, and they're never able to thrive. But community development corporations can help those who've been incarcerated thrive and break through the barrier. You ask why and how, here it is. Here's the 8 puzzle pieces that we use in community and economic development. The purpose is to eliminate the impacts of culture, social, economic, and racial isolation. So we discovered that somebody got to have a house when they get out, either a rental house or live with somebody who has a house. So housing is very important. Public spaces is very important in community and economic development. Community pride, political advocacy, job creation, public services, business development, and job training. So over 20 years ago, I used the tools of community and economic development to fuel and resource reentry. No one was doing it over 20 years ago. People thought I was crazy, but I knew that if economic development and community development could help low to moderate income people, it could help people who were getting out of prison. So I took the tools and I began to use them. One of the first tools I used was political advocacy, because after 5 years of being released and running a nonprofit, the probation and parole service in my county told me that I could not run my nonprofit because I was on parole myself. So I applied for a pardon, and lo and behold, I received a pardon. I thank God. But I found out that a pardon was not expungible in the state of South Carolina. So in 2005, I helped get the first ever felony expungement bill passed for pardons. The bill didn't pass, and every year for 13 years, I was instrumental in getting some type of bill on the table at our state legislature. So after 13 years, in 2018, we got our first felony expungement legislation passed for felony drug expungements. And so I was ecstatic. It didn't help everybody, but it was a start that our state was moving in the right direction with criminal justice reform. And so not only did we use the political advocacy piece, but housing. We created jobs. We created social enterprises in some of the small business, because people would not hire men and women who were getting out of prison, back in the day. And so here are our services. We believe in housing, low to moderate income, new home development, Education, we help guys with GED training, continuing education and technical training. We have our own social enterprise called Soteria at Work, where we do job training. We teach guys how to deconstruct houses, and they take the wood and they make beautiful reclaimed wood furniture. And the guys that don't work in our wood shop, we send them out in the community to second chance employers in our job placement division. We also believe in affirmation, relapse prevention. A lot of people who've been struggling with drugs and alcohol, we help them with those classes. We have a robust mentoring organization where we match up a guy from our program with somebody from a business community or the church, and they're mentored for the duration of the program. Financial counseling. Financial literacy is the backbone of an organization like this, because when people get out of prison, they need to understand that they have to, budget their money and understand credit. So every Saturday, people in our program are required to go through financial literacy. And we also have a 2-to-1 matching savings program that we have a $50,000 grant where if they save $1,000 up to 6 months, we'll give them $2,000 and they can use their $3,000 to go toward an asset building, like purchasing a home, buying a car, going back to school, or starting their own business. Advocacy. I mentioned earlier about our expungement legislation, and we are continuing to put forth legislation in our state, that will help people with criminal backgrounds, climb the economic mobility ladder. We believe in mobilizing previously incarcerated people to have a voice. So we are making a difference in our community. Not only do we do transitional houses, we have a 16-bed transitional housing facility where men can come into our program and stay from 6 months to 1 year. After 1 year, they graduate and we help them get into their own rental or their own property. We also own 14 low-income rentals. So yeah, we're landlords, and we have 5 vacant lots for future development. About 15 years ago, we purchased some property, and we got those properties renovated, and we were able to start people who were leaving our program in the rental property, because no one would rent property to the guys who graduated our program. So now we have 14 low-income rentals, and we're also in construction, getting ready to build 8 more 1-bedroom apartments for graduates in our program. Around Greenville, SROs, the single room occupancies, is something that we really need, because if a man or woman leave a program and they graduate, it's hard to find a 1-bedroom place so that they can continue to rebuild their lives. And so we're continuing to build out and bring properties online for people who are graduating programs similar to Soteria. So the requirements of our residents. So when a person comes into our program, they have to attend regular meetings with an appointed mentor, attend weekly church service, do financial budgeting and planning. They have to attend daily devotions and journaling. That's something that I did my 3.5 years while I was serving time in prison. I got up every day. I did a daily devotion and I journal. Maintain employment and education, and also attain proper IDs and driver's license. And upon graduation, we help them with permanent housing, furniture, and household supplies and things like that. And so people who graduate our program are really doing great. Our success rate is 96%. Only 4% of the people that leave our program return to prison. So that's an impeccable record as far as recidivism. I talked about workforce development and job training. Our flagship social enterprise is called Soteria at Work. We do job training, it's empowerment to the individuals, and we're also filling the workforce gap. Some of the men who are in our program have never worked. A lot of them have been on the street or been living in poverty for their whole life. And when they get out, they have no work skills. And so we teach them how to work. And so Soteria at Work is one of those programs. Our tagline is reclaiming wood and reclaiming lives. So when a man comes into our program and they tear down a house and they see this reclaimed wood and they begin to shape it and plane it and cut it, and then they look at themselves and they see how coming into our program, we're able to do them the same as a human being. As we talk about making the case for hiring those who've been impacted by the criminal justice system, there's so much that goes into creating a great person. So we help people to get up on time, We teach them how to interview. We teach them how to dress. Guys who are in our Reclaim Wood program, they learn how to punch a time clock. A lot of these guys have never punched a time clock. They don't understand, benefits and things like that. So that's what they do. The first 30 days when anybody come into our program, they work in our wood shop. We don't let them go out into the workforce. We train them. And then once they finish up with 30 days with us, we employ them in our wood shop, or we send them out to a program out into the our city or the surrounding county area. These are just some more of our Reclaim Wood items that we sell. We're also working with restaurants in the Greenville area. We're building tables for restaurants. So we're doing new builds for construction companies, desks for schools and things like that. So we're really doing a great job. Barn doors, farm tables. These are just some of the items that we're selling. And the men are just really, really, really loving the skills and things that they're learning. We've been blessed during COVID that we haven't shut down. Actually, our business has increased about 25 to 30% business, and we're really busy, and the guys are just learning so much. We're also able to hire a wood shop manager during the summer because we had so much work. I'm also an author, and I have my memoir. It's called Reclaimed, and it's at my website and on Amazon. And also, this is what restoration looks like. It looked like a man who was serving 20 years in prison, and he gets out and he gets married, and he has beautiful children and a wife that he can put through school and, be able to be a homeowner, a business owner, and help others to achieve their goals as well. Our program is so great. I'm just excited to share, what we do. I can't wait to, have a conversation to answer some questions, about all the things that we've been able to do here, and not only in Greenville, but in South Carolina, and also, across the world. We just went over to Liberia this year, and we're setting up a transitional house in Liberia. We're doing some stuff in the prison, working with the Ministry of Justice in Liberia as well. So we're not only a model here in the States, but hopefully we can be an international model. We're just thankful and looking forward to answer some questions. And I thank my co-presenter, Jeff, for all the great things he said.
Thank you both so much for that. I am literally in tears behind the work that you all do. So thank you. If you have any questions, please remember to put the question in that small box and click Ask the Question. So it will come to us and we will be able to present them to Jerry and Jeffrey. I do have one. Jeffrey, how could someone get started with the work that you are doing? How can companies get involved?
Sure. I mean, it's really very intimidating, I think, for a lot of business owners. They have a lot of fears around this. So rather than ask them to plunge in, we suggest something we call, let me pull it up on the screen, called bridging the box. These are intermediate steps that businesses can take to educate themselves about the path to second chance hiring, to make sure this is a viable path for them to go down. So I know many of the listeners are employees of larger firms, and this is paths they might suggest or might start having a dialogue around. The first is this concept of low risk hires. If someone has been gainfully employed 5 years, 10 years, has stable housing, stable transportation, it doesn't matter what their record is. They're just another employee. You don't have to make any particular accommodations. These are very low risk hires. So that means that if you recognize that there are low risk hires out there, it means that you stop sorting or discarding candidates because they check a box if you're in a check, depending on your state, or if they don't pass a background test. Even companies that do consider people with records tend to shunt those candidates off to a secondary review committee that rarely has the incentive to say yes. So start by recognizing that if someone's been a member of society, a good worker, employed for 5 or 10 years, don't hold their criminal record against them in any way, shape, or form. Don't treat them differently. They're just another viable candidate for employment. The other thing I suggest is businesses need to get more involved in understanding just how we got to this point of mass incarceration. And some of that is understanding how we have over-criminalized everything in society. And it's too easy to have a felony record. There's a fellow, I've never met him, he's a lawyer in Hartford, Connecticut. He has a Twitter feed called Crime a Day. And he goes just into the federal code. Most people impacted are at the state level, but he goes into the federal code every day and posts some kind of absurdity out of the federal criminal code of how easy it can be to get a felony conviction. I'll give you one example. This was a state conviction or a state charge in New York City. A young woman who was a client of a workforce development program run by a friend of mine. She was 19 years old. She was out on a date. She got caught with 2 fake IDs. She was obviously trying to get a drink while underage. 2 fake IDs in the state of New York with intent to defraud, getting a drink underage, is a felony. It's a post 9/11 anti-terrorist thing. It was never meant to be applied in these instances. But we have decades of prosecutors, public prosecutors, who learned that the way to advance their career was by overcharging and getting felony convictions as fast as you can. Fortunately, my friend stepped in. The charges were dismissed. But it's important that businesses understand that a felony does not necessarily mean what you think it is. I think it's really important to connect with companies that are doing this successfully. One of the companies that I've studied is in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's called Nehemiah Manufacturing. 130 of their 180 employees are second chance hires. It's a for-profit company in the consumer products manufacturing space. Here's this little company, very successful. The CEO of Kroger, which is the 3rd largest employer in the United States with nearly 500,000 employees, happened to go visit there. He was invited by one of the investors in the company. He was so moved. Kroger started a trial program in Cincinnati. I spoke to the CEO recently. They're expanding it nationally across their footprint of grocery stores. So visiting someone to see how it works is very impactful for employers. Connect with nonprofit partners. You can't fail to be impressed by everything that Jerry and his team are accomplishing there, and particularly, the proof is in the pudding. Their very, very low failure rate tells you they are doing it right. I mean, who wouldn't want to at least consider candidates who've come through Jerry's program and who have the backing of the staff there? It's also important to look, even if you're not ready to hire for whatever reason, or if you have regulatory restrictions on who you can hire, check your vendor contracts. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, particularly from union shops, people in the trades are frustrated. They have second chance hires. They're happy to hire second chance employees. But when they do contract work, often for, say, hospitals, they're prohibited from sending people to those facilities. That's part of the agreement. Well, I don't understand why, if you have a regulatory restriction, that should extend to the people who are doing maintenance on your building or landscaping your office park. These sort of things really need to be looked at. They were often put into company rules and regulations thoughtlessly. And then the final one is one that I think is particularly touching. I have a few people I've met along the way who have confided in me that they have a criminal record that their employer does not know about. Many cases, these are 20-year plus employees who've made a real meaningful and lasting contribution to their employer. But by the company rules, if that past conviction were ever to surface, they would be automatically terminated. So they live in fear every day. That's just not fair. So we suggest employers should consider offering amnesty to any employee who's been there 5 years, 10 years, whatever the rule they choose is. But the important thing is not to burden these employees with the fear of termination for something that a mistake they made in the past that they've already paid their dues for.
Thank you for that. Along those same lines, Jerry, we have a question. What support does your organization need from the community?
Well, that's a great question. Mentoring, because we have a lot of people who are getting out, just want to get a connection to the community. It works well when there's a member of the community to step up and mentor or disciple one of our guys throughout the duration of our program. I remember when I first came home, people who would come in to do prison ministry would not talk with me when I was out, or people would not invite me into their home. And so people with a felony conviction want to get out and feel like they're a citizen. They want to feel like they're human. And so that's why we like for people to mentor, of course, offer employment. And if you have rental properties or you're housing is very important as well. These are resources, that are much needed in our community. We offer, guys like first day package when they get out. Can you believe that people get out, they don't have clothes? If a person been in prison for 10 years or 18 years, they get out, they probably gain weight or, they can't wear the clothes or their clothes are lost. And so we have to provide clothing for people when they get out, work shoes and things like that. Tools sometimes, for people who are getting out. So, just those things that a normal person would need once they get home from prison.
Could I just add to what Jerry said? I mean, this is incredible, the sort of support and work he and Soteria are doing. But from the employer standpoint, think about what someone has had to go through who's been in prison 10 or 20 years. They didn't know what the internet is. They didn't know how to operate a smartphone. They didn't have clothing. They didn't have housing. All these things that they have to rebuild. By the time they are ready to fill out an electronic application, because most of these are electronic application, have a resume, be job ready, they are people of accomplishment and character, right? We think of them as people who, they're criminals, felons, ex-cons, whatever you want to say, the words are wrong. These are people, when you understand where they started from, when they walked outside the prison gate to where they are today, these are people with character and accomplishment.
Can I ask a question along those lines? Jerry, you made a comment about when you were out, the volunteers in prison ministry didn't want to fellowship with you. As a badged DOC volunteer for Oklahoma, we are told that we can't. So do you work with the state? How can you get around that? So a lot of people do want to, but they're told once they're released, you cannot have a relationship.
Yeah, so we've been working with our state and, they're opening up and we just explained to them, it's impossible for this not to happen. When you build a relationship with somebody for 3 or 4 years, you can't just drop that relationship. And so we've been, sharing stories with the DOC and letting them know how important it is. And, and the thing is security. If you work in the DOC, it's security. It's all about volunteers bringing stuff in or taking things out. But, this is about reentry, about rebuilding lives. And so that's one of the things that we've been able to talk to our reentry specialists here in South Carolina. And now they're beginning to see in certain ministries, I won't call their name, they have their volunteers say, you can't work with somebody when they get out. But now with DOC kind of loosening up a little bit, some of these ministries are saying you can work with somebody and follow them out, because reentry starts the day a person gets incarcerated. The day they get locked up, we need to start working with people, planning so that they can get out and have a smooth transition.
Absolutely. Next question. How can we tie in our organization to your program to present opportunities to people in your program?
Well, that's a great question. Is that employees you're talking about? Like we say what people that would help me to answer the question?
From what it sounds like for me, and if that person would like to reiterate, send another question, please, if I get it wrong. But from what it sounds like, it's how can I get my employees to come into your program to, head of HR, to come and talk, to say, this is what's available, this is how you can re-enter and join our company.
That makes sense. So we have a plethora of volunteer opportunities, and we're always, allowing people to come in. And most people come in on Saturday mornings. We have a financial literacy class, and we get bankers to come in to talk about finance, and some HR professionals come in. We also get people come in and talk about insurance, because a lot of guys don't have life insurance. So we have different nights where we have classes where we invite guest speakers to come in to talk about their profession, just so they can educate people in our program on the resources that are out in the community.
Awesome. Again, if I butchered that, Nate, please reach back out and let me know. Brett, wants to know, what are some of the collateral consequences that you found the most surprising or may surprise us?
I think Jerry will have lots to say, but I'll jump in. The one that always strikes me is, along the lines of his professional licensing. Its professional licensing barriers are enormous. One that comes up that you hear about is to be a barber, hairdresser. I get it. If you're, Sweeney Todd and, murdered people with scissors, you might want applause. But what does that have to do with the vast bulk of things that people get the convictions for? So that's one that I always see, professional licensing.
Yeah, and in South Carolina, we're one of the few states that still have a lifetime ban on SNAP benefits. Like if you have for drug offenses, only for drug offenses. So if you have a drug offense, you can't get food. You can't get SNAP benefits, which is crazy. And, so it's just crazy. And that came from the 1994 crime bill and, they haven't been repealed, but most states have, but South Carolina is one of the few states that if you have a drug conviction, you cannot get food stamps, which is crazy.
Yeah, if people want to get, dig into this deeper, you can Google the National Inventory of Collateral Consequences, which is a database, and you can search it by state and things like that. And you can see, just these incredible, enormous barriers left and right.
Yeah. And the Pell Grant is still too, if you have a drug conviction, you can't get a Pell Grant, which is crazy as well. So, and I didn't mention that one.
So let's see, questions are coming in. So someone said they love your story. Is there information on your website, Jerry, where people can find out how to get involved with your organization?
Yes, our website is packed with information. We have a great person that's working it, and there you can go. I think there's a email link, where you can put your questions in. There are volunteer opportunities, and we are always looking for volunteers and resources.
Along those same lines, do you have a storefront where furniture is sold, or you can see it online?
All of our furniture is commissioned. We have a few pieces that we built to have, but everything gets commissioned. And we have a Pinterest room, and also we have a portfolio of everything we built on our website. And you can just follow the links. And our tagline is, if you can pin it, we can build it.
Okay. All righty. For those of us who aren't in a position to make hiring decisions for our companies, what are the best ways we can become advocates in life or at work and support the success of people re-entering the workforce after a period of incarceration? Either of you can answer.
I'm going to jump in because I think we shouldn't give up lightly on the possibility of, even if you're not in HR, you can be an advocate to HR. Have you considered this? Are you looking at this? Will you come visit Soteria with me? It is a difficult thing. I recognize that. A lot of these efforts are CEO-led, but not all of them are. And particularly if your firm is focused on certain cultural values that talk about the community, I don't think there's anything more impactful than you can do to help your community than giving someone a second chance. So you do have to be a credible person. I mean, I've been, banks, as you know, can be very conservative and don't like to talk about things like this. I've been fortunate in that Fifth Third. For those of you who are less familiar with us, we're a little bit newer to Greenville, but we've been around since the 1850s. We were the first financial institution in the country to have a charitable foundation. And I can't tell you how many of our employees do prison ministry and have come up to this. So for me, this was kind of fertile ground to start talking about this. And I don't think people should dismiss the opportunity to propose hiring and at least go through those bridging the box steps, visit. A lot of companies get into this through temporary staffing in partnership with someone like Soteria. Some create internships that aren't permanent positions and try it. It is not always easy, but it is always possible.
Yes, and I'll add, we have worked with a lot of employers over the years. We don't get paid for it, but they'll call us because they know we are drug testing people on a weekly or monthly basis. People have a safe place to live, clean place to live. We provide transportation to and from work for all of our residents. They are managing their money. And so we are just producing great employees. We have put 3 or 4 guys in restaurants in Greenville. We have one guy who's working at the Kitchen Sink restaurant, been there for, I think, over 2 years now. And the owner of the restaurant said, I wish I would had 12 of these guys. He's never been late, hadn't failed a drug test. You know, he's at work on time. He's my most valuable employee because of the program that he went through. And I don't say that because of Soteria, but any program like ours, people who come through these programs are doing very good because they want it. And anybody who's ever had anybody with a criminal background work for them, we will outwork anybody. So
that's right.
Awesome. Can you speak about the significance of your incredible success rate at Soteria? I still think I'm saying it wrong. I'm so sorry. And please expand on the actions that create the success of your clients.
So we're a faith-based organization because that's what's changed my life while I was in prison. And so I'm unashamed of that. But I believe because of the regiment that we have, men get up every morning, they do a devotion, they journal, they write down their feelings. We have what they call a DEI, which is a daily attitude, a DAI, a daily attitude inventory. They have to write down every day how they're feeling. I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm angry. They have to write about it. And so we read that. And so these are they're checking their feelings. They know they're going to get drug tested. You know, they know they have to save money. They know they're going to have to look at their credit because they know when they leave Soteria, they have to have somewhere to live. And if we don't set them up, they're going to be failing and they're going to be homeless. And so we don't want to set people up to fail. So we have a rigorous program that people leave. I've kicked guys out of the program at 6 months. They didn't graduate, but they would call me back 2 years later and say, I know I was a knucklehead, but everything you taught me and the program taught me, I put it to work. I'm married now, I'm a homeowner, and I haven't been back to prison. And so these are the type, I get these calls all the time from people who've been through our program and just pick up what we put out there. And I tell everybody, I've been out 21 years. I'm the first graduate. And what I can do, anybody can do. And so I'm a successful businessman, homeowner, consultant, travel around the world. And I tell these guys, you can do it too. God is no respecter of persons. And so that's what I tell people who come to our program and they get it. And that's why our success rate is so well.
I'm going to jump in and just, kind of also emphasize what Jerry has said. When we speak to businesses and see the models of success, one of the keys is finding the right nonprofit partner. And that nonprofit partner has to be rigorous and has to hold people accountable. So the worst thing, and there have been some cases of this, are nonprofits that send over the person most in need but not most ready. And burn a bridge forever with employers. And there's some that do this repeatedly, or that measure their success in placements, not long-term success. So when you find you want to ask a nonprofit partner, are you drug testing? Do you kick people out? How do you measure success? Placement or long-term success? How do you set them up for that success? So not every nonprofit works, but ones like Soteria are successful for a reason. It's that discipline. And, this is not my tribe, but I will say that kind of faith-based approach I've seen be successful time and time again.
I love that. Thank you. So we have to ask, do you know of a program that supports women in the same way your program supports men?
So there are a couple programs. There's one program in Greenville called Step by Step Hope Project. They support women, and we are going to start another women's program in the next couple of years. We had a program in 2008, 2009. We closed it down, but that is the biggest need that we have, not only in the state, but in the nation. There's not enough reentry program for women. Right.
All righty. We just have a few more minutes. If you all have any more questions, please send them over. Meanwhile, I'd like to ask Jeffrey first, please share about your book. And then
thank you very much. So,
we want to know about your books.
So HarperCollins, and this is the product of about 6 years of research and experience and about a year of writing. And HarperCollins Leadership is my publisher. It'll be out on April 13th. It's already visible on Amazon for people who want to take a look at it. The title is Untapped Talent: How Second Chance Hiring Works for Your Business and the Community. And I wrote it primarily because I realized that this is such an obstacle for businesses to embrace. And one of the things that would help is having a business book with a reputable publisher. And that would kind of send the signal that it's okay. The other thing that was happening is I've been giving talks around this. Fifth Third has been having panels around the country on this. And I get CEOs all excited because they saw the potential, but then they go back to their workplace and get beaten down. You know, their head of HR would say no, their CFO would say no. And I realized they needed some ammunition. And read the book, look at the experience of other businesses that have been successful, and it has been the approach. So I'm very excited about it next year, and I hope you all will be hearing a lot about it. That's my goal. I'm a man on a mission, and the book is the vehicle.
Jerry, do you have something real quick?
Yeah, real quick. So my book is called Reclaimed. It is my memoir. It's my life story of start back when my mother was murdered all the way through school. And it kind of ends with, modern day, and kind of showing throughout my life the miracles that has happened through my life just by being resilient and kind of persevering, and just, the hope going from tragedy to triumph, letting people know, regardless of where you come from, you can make it, you can do it. And I mainly wrote it so that I can send it back into the prisons to guys to know that there is hope. But a lot of people have been getting encouraged by my book, even people who've never been in prison. So I'm thankful. And you can get it at my website at jerryblassingame.com or at Amazon as well. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Do you all have any closing remarks for us?
If you're an employer, try it. You'll like it.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Jeff, and thank you to the Chamber and Nika and all the team, putting this together. This has been great. It's just great to be at this table, just to be able to share the work that we're doing in this space, which doesn't get done much. So we're thankful that we can shine a light on what's going on in reentry. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of the Chamber's 4th Annual DEI Summit and presenting sponsor Michelin North America, I would like to thank both of you for your participation in this event. At this time, I would like to tell the attendees, since I'm going to check one more time. Nope, we don't have any more questions. You can log out and transition to the next segment of today's summit per the agenda. This concludes this session. Thank you all so very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.